Welcome to the Nutmeg Tavern. It's Friday, woo! I'm your host, John Townsend. Today we're going to be digging into, well, fun historical questions, answers. I got a little bit of fun information here. We're going to talk about George Washington. Well, it's going to be a fun time. Come on into the virtual Nutmeg Tavern. I'm sorry to say that the Nutmeg Tavern actually sits on the opposite side of a vortex, so you're going to have to, visit with us virtually. But come in, have a seat, plenty of room. Ryan is behind the bar.
Hello.
He's going to be serving us today and keeping me on track.
Yes.
On the other side of the time vortex, in the technical seat, on the console, is Aaron.
Hello.
That's it. Hello.
What are you supposed to say?
And Kyle.
Hello.
He's in the chat. Hello.
Well, it's good to be here today.
Hello is
Good to
all
be
you
here.
get.
It's good to be here in the Nutmeg Tavern.
It is good. It is good. It's been one of those weeks. It's always usually by Friday at 4:00. It's been one of those weeks. So I do a lot of traveling for my business. Time traveling. I'm here, I'm there, and I spent a lot of the week in the 21st century battling computers. I'm ready to go back and be in the Nutmeg Tavern, be in the 18th century. Woo, let me tell you. So today we've got food here in the Nutmeg Tavern. I made up a batch of ship's biscuits for us to enjoy.
Don't they look delicious?
And they are delicious. I even have one left. Do we know what date? Can you look that up?
Mm-hmm.
I'm somehow 2012 we made ship's biscuits as an episode. It's still very popular. This is one of the original ship's biscuits from that episode. And no, I'm not going to eat it.
Are you ready?
I'll eat it.
May 14th, 2012.
May 14th, 2012.
I'm going to throw that video in chat right now.
So
just
this
for
is
fun.
a ship's biscuit, and this one's got a lot of little wormholes going on in it. This one looks like it's a whole wheat biscuit.
That's from that shoot?
Yeah, this is from that shoot.
Amazing.
And it's my last one from the shoot, so that's why otherwise I would eat it right here on screen. Instead, I made these little guys. And you gotta soak them if you're gonna try to eat them. That's
not what Kyle and I are doing.
I made a special brew tea.
Yeah, we got tea. That's right, we got tea.
Soak them in.
Yeah.
We're gonna see what these babies are all
We don't
about.
have one of those tea tins, do we?
Can you hear that?
Last week it was, hey, we don't have the apron to show you. This week, hey, we don't have the tea to show you. But we're drinking some of this wonderful bohea black tea that we do sell on the website.
Yeah.
The mix is good. Wow. Excellent. Let's do a couple questions and then we'll roll on with some other content.
Okay. What was a normal breakfast on the frontier?
Normal breakfast on the frontier. There's a couple different things that we can use to help us understand what breakfast was. A lot of times it's, it's whatever's left over from supper last night that people didn't eat. Or it can be very simple. There's a transition in the 18th century. Probably early on, the drink might be something like small beer. It might be water. Breakfast might be as simple as bread and cheese. Then later on in the 18th century, coffee and chocolate become much more popular, even for common laborers. They're spending more than they ought to on fairly expensive tea, coffee, and chocolate, which they eat almost exactly the same way as a breakfast dish, as something that they, survive upon. That, again, bread, cheese, something very, very simple, is many times the breakfast for most people. So, interesting diary of William Byrd, as early 1720s, I think. He talks over and over about eating boiled milk for breakfast. And when he says boiled milk, there's another reference. We think, okay, boiled milk, that sounds really weird. Why would anybody drink boiled milk? Well, it's a milk porridge is what he's actually referring to. I've seen multiple references where they called that just boiled milk. So sometimes it's a porridge like that, even for people who are very well-to-do, like William Byrd. What is going on?
What sort of sorcery is going on here?
Be careful. Be careful doing that. He could get torn apart.
You never know what's going to happen.
He could get torn apart going through the vortex. Was it like rubbing on the fabric? Oh,
We have a special device for Aaron to just go back and forth between
It's like a
space-time.
It's like a roller coaster cart. Woo!
Whoa.
Because you got to go through at a certain speed, or else you are torn apart.
And at a certain angle. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Too true. Too true. These are, if they're nice and thin, they break up a little bit. These are great.
I put one in the bottom of this little tea bowl and poured tea directly on it. I'm just letting it sit there to see what it does.
3 days later, it'll be ready. Go ahead, Kyle.
If you had a fireplace to cook with, did you also need a stove?
Well, I mean, obviously, in primitive conditions, or people that don't have a lot of wherewithal, they're going to do all their cooking on a single fire, something like a fireplace. There are things like stoves. Obviously, Franklin has his wood stove, and there are stove-like things in more well-to-do kind of situations. Sometimes they cook over a chafing dish, which is a little container of coals that you bring up onto a work surface, and then you can cook slowly with that. But they don't have stoves as we know them. Sometimes, like in the German kitchen where there's a raised hearth, there are certain situations or certain hearths that were actually built with a hole down the center of it, and probably a little grate that you would have, so you could really get like a stove-like situation. Pretty rare.
Sorry, I have a chip biscuit in my mouth.
Yeah. You'd be picking your teeth out later on.
How often would people go to town to get things if they could not produce them themselves? Would it be a yearly thing?
No, well, it might, but probably not. Martha Ballard's diary, and she's in the early 19th century. It's all right, he's getting over this coffee thing. Martha Ballard's diary is pretty good for that, and you can get the whole diary online. There's the Midwife's Tale, which is sort of like an interpretation of the diary, but there's the whole diary that's available online. And you get to see when she talks about going to town, and she's, on the edge of a town in Maine, not a very big place. She talks about going to town fairly often, but she's out and about. She's doing her job as a midwife, so. But I think most people that aren't in the howling wilderness are going to town fairly often.
Peel that actually just a little bit. It's clipping. Just a
Let's hope that's a little better.
If you don't stop, I won't bring back the other mic.
So, I'm not going to say anything. Go ahead, Kyle.
All right. When could people first start ordering things from catalogs?
Perfect segue right into what we're going to be talking about today.
See what it did there?
It was like it was planned.
Was it planned?
No.
No,
You didn't do
not
that?
at all.
You didn't set
No,
that up?
it wasn't planned at all. 1759, George Washington is ordering goods from London. He writes down a list. Send me this, send me that, send me something else. Sometimes it's something like, send me so many shillings worth of X, right? So I've got this list of items that he sent for, and the tobacco growers would basically sell their crop into England and say, okay, with the proceeds of that, send me these kinds of things. Now, generally they got in trouble over and over and over again because they would get more and more into debt. I think it was a system that the vendors had of that. But nonetheless, we have this list. Wonderful thing about important people like George Washington is that his papers, they have not gone astray. And so we have tons and tons and tons of documentation about the life of George Washington, whereas regular people, somebody's account book, which might have all this information into it, out the window, who cares? They're just a normal person. Martha Ballard's story is a lot like that. Her diary was just a pile of papers for 100 years until someone really got together and transcribed them and bound them together. Another one of those could have easily been lost to history, just like that, even though it was a very, very important story. So here's the goods from London that George Washington asked for. There's, let's see if I can find the beginning of the list. It's giant here. Doesn't really matter where I start. This section was really interesting. He orders a bunch of clothing. He orders a bunch of fabric. Here's a section where he's ordering toys. So this is neat. He gets, it says something like 10 shillings worth of toys. And that's kind of all it says. And then right after that, it was 6 little books for children beginning to read. So beginning reader books. So there's a little footnote down here that says things Washington received, among other items from the toy manufacturer, a child's fiddle, which I thought was really cool, a stable with 6 horses, and then a coach with 6 horses in a box, a corner cupboard, a filigree watch, so a toy watch, a child's husset, so maybe a housewife, I'm not sure exactly what that is, a neat walnut bureau, so a little like doll's chest of toys, and a neat enameled watch box, so a box to put this fancy little toy watch in. So interesting about the items he would get like that. He got a giant pile, ordered up a whole bunch of tools. So saws, sickles, hand saws, adzes, gimlets, compasses, crows for making kegs, a vice, compass, adze, shave, a bruz, a gouge, and all these bits and saws, some fun stuff like that. Just straight up fabrics. He gets some shoe buckles, 2 postilion caps. This is 1760, so what does he mean by a postilion cap? Really good question. 2 lanterns. I'd like to know what those looked like. This one was interesting. 8 busts. So he wants some fancy busts to put in his library, so his library looks all fancy. And then it says, give me one of Alexander the Great, one of Julius Caesar, what's this, a king of England, Sweden, and the 4th king of Prussia, along with some animals, so he wants some. So that's how he's ordering stuff. So it's just kind of random. Hey, why don't you look around, find this for me, because there's no catalog to order from. He orders a whole bunch of medicines, which includes 4 pounds of long pepper, which is a kind of, sometimes you see long pepper in recipes, like a real spicy black pepper. Let's see, what else does he have here? Brown sugar, barley sugar, alum, oil of turpentine, and some rhubarb. Now, what's missing in the list? He didn't order any nutmeg, so he must have had a good supply. Locally, 3 pounds of best Scotch snuff. You know who that was for, right? He's got his mouth full of.
I do know who that was for.
Yes,
Martha Washington.
Martha was the snuff user in the household. People asked, I think it was last week maybe, about hot weather clothing. What do people do when it's really hot weather? Well, right here in this one section it says, a light summer suit made of duroy or something by the measure. So it's like specifically send me summer clothing, send me something light. So they're, obviously they're ordering things specifically for that. There was one other last little thing I really wanted to. There's Cheshire cheese. There's green tea in the list. Where was that? There's mustard, padlocks, an ivory comb, and fancy women's shoes, not just silk ones, but calico shoes. So shoes that had a calico outside to them. A hogshead of best porter. He wants a bunch of good porter. And that reminds me. We're drinking this with tea, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're drinking this with tea.
Yes.
Did the shipment of rum not come in? I mean, this should go with like grog, shouldn't it?
We could certainly do that, but I was under the weather, so I thought tea would be nice. Although rum might burn that right out. I'll go either way. I really chose this tea because I wanted to let people know that it's a new product today.
It is. And I did choose this tea from the importers for something that would go well with nutmeg, kind of specifically.
Do you have nutmeg in yours right now?
I do. I did.
Oh, is it?
I went right into it. Yeah. Yep.
Which one is it? Black Bahia tea?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll put a link in the chat.
Yeah,
It's
he
really,
got
really good.
for all this stuff, and he only orders like a ream of paper, one ream. It must have been really expensive. Either that or he didn't need to write much, and he needed to write a lot. So.
How about some donations? Is this a good segue?
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
Maybe do that for a second.
Love it.
Hang on one second. This mic is.
All these microphone problems.
Okay. So, this live studio is being janky, and all my donations went away.
Oh no.
Hang on. Hang on. There they are. All right, got it. Let's go. So this was from before the stream started. This is mandatory carry. Says can't make it, but I'll catch up after work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sue O'Connor, thank you so much. I didn't know what thickness leather I should use to make a thimble, so I asked questions at Townsends if someone might know, and they answered in the same day. Thank you, around for customer service. That's awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sue, I saw your note on Patreon, so thank you.
Hey, can you get that lapel from under your jacket? It's just kind of rubbing on you right now. Just put it where you want it then. Marshman Hills, thank you. Says that's a heck of a jacket and hat. Nicole Marley, thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Says hello. Timothy Kernock, thank you. Max are cool, thank you so much. Was just talking with my brother about Ship's Biscuits. It's so cool to see them, to see on the show. Wormholes, tell us more about what's going on with those. Alexander Lipich, thank you. Are there any numbers on how many ounces of fibers people ate back in the day, and how many ounces of meat in a week on average? Joseph, oh, I don't want to say your last name, I'll butcher it. Greetings from Slovakia. Keep the good job going on. Thank you. That's awesome. Blob Monster, thank you. Says happy Friday.
Thanks
and
so much.
Yeah, Jacob Kilgore, thank you. How much nutmeg is too much nutmeg? I think we know that answer.
You're asking the wrong
That's all I
people.
got. Yep. Asking the wrong man.
I know that you need to answer these, but I want to kind of come back and forth to this. So this biscuit I broke up into little pieces, and it's the first layer is kind of softened. When you break it up, you can see layers like a biscuit.
Right.
And the first layer is softened, but it hasn't done anything. This one, I didn't break up at all. And although most of the tea is gone, like it's soaked in, it's just like there's nothing. Anyway, go ahead. I'll keep you guys posted.
I'm riveted.
The wormholes in the bread, yeah. Is the audio mic going on?
Yeah,
all right?
it's good.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Yeah, little bugs. They it almost looks like powder post beetle or something, like termites going through this. Yeah, they're little wormy guys, and they like to eat the ship's biscuit. And I don't know what they are. You just kind of see holes and then dust afterwards. And sometimes in the time period, they got to be fairly large. And there was this one period account where they like open up a barrel of ships and it's just like nothing but bugs. Yeah.
If they'd had a freezer in the time period, they could freeze them and then still eat them. Like there are little worms that get into your humidor.
Okay, so
sometimes.
next.
No, I'm serious.
No, I'm serious too.
What'd you say, Kyle? I had you muted, sorry.
Carbs and your protein.
Do you know about the cigar worms?
I've actually never heard of this.
Yeah, the little worms that they'll get into your humidor or into your cigars, and you'll be able to see little wormholes. You can put them in the freezer, kill them off, and then rehumidify the cigars. You would be able to do that as well with biscuits, although they didn't have freezers.
Well, they could go north of, real north and get into a cold day. Anyway,
Right.
Fiber and meat and, whenever you're trying to do generalizations of, poor people, regular people, it's just almost impossible to do a generalization because, it changes family to family, region to region, and whether, some places, they might not see meat for an entire year. And other places, it's going to be a fairly common occurrence that they're going to have some kind of meat, even if it, maybe a real low-class meat. Maybe they're eating the offal of an animal or something else. I cannot answer that question very definitively at all, except to say that probably most of the time, most people aren't eating that, lower-class people aren't eating that much meat. Again, with lots of caveats in an answer like that. I think I'm ready for Kyle again.
What kind of traveling tradesmen were there in the 18th century?
A tremendous quantity in certain kinds of. There are some trades that, you have a specialized thing that you do, and you just once you do what you need to do, they don't need you again for an entire year or 6 months or whatever. Something that would be like that would be somebody who dresses the stones on mills. So like he'll travel all over the place and dress the stones on a mill and then keep moving. The Morley diary from the early 18th century, he was an indentured servant. He comes to North America. He travels around for, like 5 years, and he ends up going back to England. He traveled around after he got out of his indentures, and he fixed clocks. So there are a lot of people that are like that. People that fix things. These are two fixing situations. How often do you need your clock fixed? Well, once a year, and then you don't need it fixed again. So those are the obvious kinds of things that would be a traveling tradesman. And then they had, obviously traveling kind of peddler people. There might have people that would do things like traveling for harvests or so food harvest, and other times it's traveling for a different kind of trade harvest. Like if somebody might like travel and do sheep shearing or doing specialty parts with textile trades, so that again, one of those things, I only need this to happen once a year, and the people would travel around and do that.
Yeah, I accidentally missed a donation.
Okay.
There are quite a few. I didn't see it. This is from Rob Poole. Thank you. Says, if you own land in a less inhabited area, like some of the the Western Midwest in the 1770s, how would you find your way to those areas? Tools or guides? ?
Well, reading about what's happening in Kentucky is one of the very best classic situations where the land was being sort of purchased and parceled off, and people needed to go there. That's happening right perfectly in our time period from the 1770s up into, say, 1800 or so. Very intense sort of settling of that area. There's a lot of, there's a lot of legal wrangling, and there's animosity with Native Americans. There's all kinds of stuff going on in Kentucky in that time period. But and you would have to go. They would send people out and say, "Go find a piece of land for me." So a speculator might do that. A speculator might just buy up giant, huge tracts or get them given to him. Don't ask me how that works. And then sell off these little parcels, and they would tell people, go out there and survey it for me. If you read Nicholas Cresswell's journal, it's exactly what's happening. Somebody says, "Hey, Nicholas Cresswell, will you go out and survey this area for me? I'll give you half the land." So there are those kinds of. Now, I don't think he ever followed through. It never actually worked out, but that was the concept. So there's things like that going on. People would get these pieces of land. They would maybe they would settle there. Most likely they would just sell that land on again, but they would have to send somebody out there to sort of map it for them. Okay, you go on the Kentucky River until you get to this one bend, and then I want this 100 acres that's over here, right? And from the big beech tree to the giant stone. I can't describe it beyond that because that's all I've got for you. There's probably some real specific information that would help us out with a question like that. Probably write a book about it.
Could John please tell us the name of the book that breaks down things by ethnic and cultural groups?
Oh, yeah. That's that's Albion's Seed. So ALBIONSEED, and just amazing giant book. It's available in print. You can even get the audio if you want to just kind of digest it in a different way. Usually I like to have both of those, so I can read the book, and then sometimes when I'm doing other things and I just want to absorb it, I'll listen to it. But it's really good.
Have you been in that one any recently?
No, not real recently. But it echoes back with every other thing you read. It helps you kind of set the grid work for, okay, who is this that I'm listening to? Like the Martha Ballard. It immediately says, oh, this is this person from this kind of context. This is why they're doing this or thinking this kind of thing. So it really helps us get into the minds and hearts of people in the 18th century and why they think what they think, which can be almost impossible for us today because we swim in this water and we don't even know what it is, right? And it's just hard for us to imagine people that are completely outside of our experience. That's why it's even so hard for us to understand people in different parts of the world until we can learn about them, visit that place or whatever.
Were there such things as hotels, or did lost travelers stop at a house and ask to stay the night? So,
yes and yes. There are lost travelers staying wherever it's available. We have a video that talks about a bed for the night, which is based on some of Charles Woodmason's writing, and he was a backcountry minister who would go around, and sometimes, there was no place to stop. It's raining hard. You just knock on the door and they say, oh yeah, sure. Sleep here by the fire. Not uncommon whatsoever, depending on where you're at in the colonies in the 18th century. And other places, there are taverns, inns, common houses that people would stay at. And the communities would specifically say, yes, we want to have this tavern open for people that are traveling, so that they have a place to stay. And they even would say, hey, you folks that live around here, you can only be here for about an hour, and then we don't want you to just hang out. This isn't a neighborhood bar. You can come in here and drink and eat, but we don't want you to stay forever. But it was open that whole time for travelers specifically.
So real quick, let's talk a little bit about what ship's biscuits are and why we're soaking them.
Yeah.
Did you bring up any of that, the text that you were looking at this week?
No, I didn't.
Because that was a lot of fun, but you can describe it.
Oh yeah. There's some ship's biscuits are made for shipboard use, and they also used them different travelers and whatever. They would make ship's biscuits that are a simple, hard, unleavened bread, usually sort of hockey puck sized chunks, maybe 5 or 6 to the pound. These are small ones because I wanted to make them so they were a little more breakable, so you eat them a little easier. And travelers would use them. Sailors were given a certain allowance of ship's biscuits, usually a pound a day. And so and they would have to figure out how to eat them as best they could, break them up. But of course, you can put them in your pocket. They last a long time. You could use them to attack people if you wanted to. Throw them at them and knock them in the head because they're very, very, very hard. Good ship's biscuits. They can last a long time, but they do weevils and things kind of go at them and eat them up. How are they made? Usually they're made not in a household situation. Does my microphone need to be adjusted?
It's just rubbing all over your shirt.
Here, I'll hold it. So.
Well, no. Strap it on somewhere. Okay, so here's what you can do.
Hold on. Yes?
If you put it back on that side, move your cravat, out of the way.
Gotcha.
Got it?
It's right here. I'm going to put the cravat.
And then, rotate that. There you go.
We'll try that. Okay.
Yep.
So, ship's biscuits, usually made in an industrial setting or a commercial setting. They would take pounds and pounds of barrels of flour. They'd mix it with salt. They'd mix it with water, sometimes just with water. And then they would knead it. And sometimes they kneaded it in a very industrial sort of way. They would have these huge, long rolling pins that they would kind of bolt to the wall and work up and down on this giant hunk of dough and just really work it over. Then it was formed into these puck-sized shapes and then shot into the oven. That basically was a sort of quick rotating situation where you would shoot them into the oven. And it even talked about how this oven would hold, I don't know, was it 70 or something?
Yeah,
something
it was some incredible.
The oven would hold something like 70 of these biscuits, and they would start to cook as soon as you threw them in.
Right.
And so that they would actually alter the size of the biscuits as they were throwing it in because the bigger ones would cook slower. So you'd throw big ones in first and then smaller and smaller and smaller and then shut the door on it and then you would cycle that, open it back up when they were done, take them out. They're never done the first time. And so then they would put them on drying racks above the ovens, and they might be there for a month or 2 months while they continued to dry out. And then they would bag them up and send them out where they would go onto ships and other places.
I was thinking about how many biscuits will fit on a peel and how many you're putting in the oven at one time and placing them, but pulling the other ones out. This is crazy rotation.
Yeah, and they did a very fast, I don't know, must have been paid by the biscuit, right? So they were really working quickly at moving these in and out. Once you were trained in that, it was like a machine.
I'm gonna do some more donations.
Sure.
And thanks to everyone who's donated.
Thank you.
And if I forget one, definitely say it in chat. That's what got me to see that other one. Where did we leave off? Okay, here we go. Speed and Style Tony, thank you. How long would it take for Washington's list of goods to actually arrive? Mike Crook, thank you. An appreciation of Ryan's knowledge sharing about cigar beetles from a fellow brother of the Leaf. Also, of course, more nutmeg for the crew. Thank you. Teddy the Fourth, thank you. What type of government services were provided? Things like roads, medical, police, etc. Aaron C, thank you. Perhaps you could use the old ship's biscuit for hockey. Have a great weekend. Jacqueline Camacho, thank you. Hi, when are you coming to Colonial Williamsburg? I work at one of the Colonial Taverns. I've learned so much about the 18th century food from you. And then Christopher Ramsey, is ship's biscuit the same as hardtack? That's all I got.
Excellent.
Thank you. John Wandery, thank you. Says, great job, guys. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. How long does it take to arrive? Undoubtedly, he's sending off his list, and he might not see them for 6 months. So, these days Amazon is a little better than that. They took a long time and there was wheeling and dealing along the way. So it might be like a once a year kind of a shipment that you would get of things. Like, okay, what are we going to ask for this year? Kind of like Christmas.
Well, and think about that with seasonal stuff, right? So
exactly.
If you wanted it when it was fresh, you had to order it when it was coming around, 6 months before, so you were the first one to get it. When the supply was there. That's really interesting.
Maybe. It's like there's nothing here that's fresh, right?
Right.
But there is a certain. It's available this time of year, even though might not go bad necessarily, because it's going to go bad on the shipboard, that's for sure. If it's anything that's, I mean, there's porter, there's food items, but most of it's pretty stout stuff. Government services, and there's, this is most of the local governments and colonial governments are in North America in the 18th century are vestiges or little kind of takeoffs of that same sort of local and provincial government from Great Britain from the 17th century. So it's sort of like the colonies were a little time capsule in some ways, because a lot of this stuff is set up in the 17th century, and then England kind of keeps going, and North America kind of keeps going this direction, and maybe even goes off obviously it goes off a different direction in 1776. So it's, if you want to know kind of what those government services were like, what you do is you look at Great Britain and you look in the 17th century. There are things like poor relief that is going on, and it's part of the local government at that time. There are roads, sort of, not really, and it's hard to say. Sometimes they had sort of private roads, turnpikes, toll roads, but roads are pretty rough. If you want to know about like fire service, well, Benjamin Franklin is one of those people that sets up a private fire service, because there's nothing like that is other than just totally volunteer. Hey, somebody's house is on fire, grab a bucket. Police, again, it's a real strange situation with, there is nothing like police really in the 18th century. It's more like, I'm going to go find, sometimes there's constables, or that you basically capture the miscreant yourself and bring them to justice. So it's almost a completely private matter. So basically government's there to protect you from other, from marauders and from other countries. So they're mostly about defense and a little bit of justice. Courts and things like that. Those are your government services. Next question. Woo, when am I going to be to Colonial Williamsburg? I would love to go to Colonial Williamsburg this year. Why don't you just put it on the schedule?
That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was easy.
You should. Well, never mind.
I know. It's tough because we have so many things we want to do in a year. I mean, so many things, and it's like, do I do this? Do I do that? It's hard to make the right choices. Hardtack and ship's biscuit. Hardtack is basically completely the same thing as a ship's biscuit. It changes its name. You really don't see the name hardtack that show up until the early 19th century, maybe even almost the mid-19th century, when that typical Civil War term, hardtack, comes into being. I'm still wondering about exactly. I've tried to do some of that research. I just haven't been able to pull that term back into the 18th century. Ship's biscuit is just the classic term that everybody uses in the 18th century for basically the same thing. Let me do Patreon. While we're here,
Ooh, that's a good idea.
John takes a deep breath because I got a giant Patreon list. Last week we had Michael here, and I just, time got away from us, and I wasn't able to get it. Patreon. People sign up for Patreon to help us out with a little bit of money each month, and every week I try to grab the new list of brand new people that help support us on Patreon. We are at 600 people supporting us on Patreon, so super thank you, all of you folks, especially you that you've been supporting us for months and months or years even. New Patreon supporters: Blue Jay, Gianni Delirta, Barb Wilson, Mark Smith, Gwen Clayton, Brandon Wong, Margaret Menger, just Caitlin, and then there's Kristen Highland, and then there's Jessica, Peter Sorrentino, Lorraine Cox, Vernon Garty, Vera Boyne, Jacob Riddle, and sometimes people want to help us out just kind of a one-time. The best way to do that, biggest bang for the buck, is just with the PayPal link, and you can just send whatever you feel is appropriate, whatever you feel like doing. So new PayPal supporters, Jill Clark, Christine Jones, Susan Doer, and Elizabeth Kilmer. All those folks have helped support us just fresh in the last 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is. It's how we can continue doing what we do here. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
So this particular ship's biscuit, I started soaking at the beginning of the live stream. It soaked up all of the tea, so I added some more tea. And I've got as you can see, like I just put the tip of a knife in, and it broke apart because it's so brittle. Like
I thought you said you broke your knife.
No, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's just like, it's not doing anything.
Right,
Like,
and you can
so-
imagine if you make them a lot bigger, they're going to be all that much more. Although I think that idea, when you need them really, really hard, what it does is it creates a lot of little flat layers. And they need to be pierced, or else they will kind of puff up and get a, they will, they'll puff up and then crack and then break. So piercing them with the little holes really helps it stay nice and dense, which is what you want, because you want the maximum quantity of food stuff for that kind of volume.
Well, and I'm thinking about what I'm doing now is just kind of shaving this into little pieces. And they're not really going to break up, right? So that adds like a texture. If you're making a soup or something like that,
Yeah.
it makes you feel like you're not just drinking hot liquid, right?
Yeah, and one of the episodes where I used ship's biscuits, it probably was right there in that same series, was the Lobscouse episode, where you took ship's biscuits and you pounded them up. You put them in a bag or in a cloth, and you beat them with something like a hammer, like you do with stockfish, or like a rolling pin. And then it would break them up a little bit, and then you could soak them a little bit and fry them or whatever with other items. So that lobscouse is just so great, and it's a fun recipe. And again, another really popular one from, I think it was the second season.
Ready for more questions?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Where would you suggest to look for period school books?
Period school books. Do you know what DeLee's business is called? Colonial.
That's what I was just thinking of, but I can't remember the website.
DeLee Sayers, we sell some of the books that he prints, but he has a bunch more. And if I could remember his website. Anyway, he reprints a bunch of items like that, and I'm sure he's got some chap books and some other like beginning reader books of the time period. You can find some of those not printed, but kind of online PDF versions if you go on books.google.com and search for
Yeah.
I could find them for you. How's that?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do something like that.
It's really hard to tell somebody how to search on Google Books.
Yeah. Books, kids' books. We have, like on the Savoring the Past, we put together a big old document of links directly to 18th century cookbooks, PDF version. I don't have anything like this, and this week I was just digging, found this excellent book on training midshipmen from like 1800. I sent you that list. There was a list at the end of the book of all the things a midshipman needs, and it was a giant list. And you're thinking, guy, he only has about as much room as this tabletop to put it all in. I don't know how it could ever fit. But there are all these books that are available, and they're all free. They're all PDFs online. It can be hard to read, but they're chock full of information. It's just hard to kind of pull the information out of them because they're so dense.
Yeah.
But kids' book at the time period. Come back next live stream, and let me see what I can do for you.
Excuse me. Where would they get fabric to make their clothes? Was it all homemade for the most part?
We get this question quite often. and it depends on who you are. This list right here, George Washington's list from 1760 or whatever. I mean, he's got probably maybe a sixth or maybe an eighth of the items on this list, which is an awful lot of stuff, is fabric. Fabric to make items. Some items he orders whole. It's like, send me a suit of clothes. And then most of the time it's 40 yards of fustian, 1 piece of Irish linen, a whole bunch of thread. Like he orders 20 pounds of brown thread. Sometimes, and some of them are hard to understand. You might even misinterpret it. Something like, bear skin. You say, he's ordering bear skins? It's kind of fabric. So there's a bunch of items that are like that on here where he's just ordering fabric. The same thing is happening. Stores are getting the same thing. Hey, send me whatever, and somebody will get a whole shipment of fabric in. You go and buy it. And then there is a lot of textile industry going on, cottage industry happening everywhere. So people are growing cotton in some places, linen, mostly, at least in the 18th century, and they're weaving it up themselves, wool items, and you'll see references to that. So sometimes you'll see things talking about people wearing Virginia cloth. So they're wearing cloth that is homemade, and so you'll see references about that too. So both things are happening.
Got a question for Ryan.
Oh, yes.
When you said people lit pipes with embers from the fire, did they have any other way? Also, what tobacco was in the 18th century?
Well, there were other ways to light a pipe. You can use a magnifying. You can use like a magnifying glass to light it with. But I mean, an ember is definitely the best way, or a stick from the fire, because there's always a fire going. There's just always a fire going. Tobaccos, rope tobacco, flake tobacco, things that store well, ship easily, were popular. You're not going to see, like, when you walk into a tobacco store today and they've got all these jars full of bulk tobacco, you're not going to see as much of that. It's usually in some kind of a compressed form ready to ship. So, rope braided stuff is really great. Flake stuff is compressed. That's really great. Plus, if you smoke that type of tobacco aboard a ship, the wind doesn't heat your pipe up like it would with a bulk tobacco, because there's more space for the wind to move through your pipe, and so it's not burning it up, that's why sailors use flake tobaccos.
Good. And there's 2 main kinds. There's the Orinoco and the sweet whatever. I don't know.
I'm still one. Yes, Orinoco is very popular.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're calling Burleys and Virginias and things like that today
are just.
I don't know I don't know the best way to trace all it back out. I'm working on that.
There we go.
Do you think it would be easier for an 18th century person to come to the 21st century, or vice versa?
I think it'll be a tough row to hoe either direction you go. I think because we have concepts of the past, that it would be easier for us to go back. Obviously, we'll be blindsided by 1,000,001 things. I think if you pulled someone out of the past and brought them to, the 21st century, their head would be spinning. I don't think it would have any way of grasping what was going on.
What did they use to get the blue color for fabrics?
Indigo.
Like your jacket.
Indigo is the main thing. There's all kinds of interesting dye stuffs like logwood that would give you you might get like purple or reds out of logwood. But I think indigo, I'm not sure what else gives you a blue that's industrial. There are certain kinds of herbs or whatever,
I
kind
feel
of
like
natural
for
dyes.
the blue, Maggie touched on that in the laundry service,
Yeah.
or something other than indigo, but I can't remember what it was. So you might go back and
Well,
watch those.
she was talking about the whitening, and
okay.
and that was what was it called? Smalt.
Yeah, there we go.
Which was one of the ways, and then there was like the blue stone that you grind up. Oh, anyway, Next.
Hey, real quick, let's talk about this tea we're drinking because it's available as of today on our website.
So one of the things that's in George Washington's list here is tea. Tea shows up in just all kinds of these wonderful magazine or newspaper advertisements. Everything. It's like, you can come and buy tea at our shop. We do have a nice, simple, it says nice, sweet black tea. That's probably very, very similar to the black tea they had in the time period, which they called bohea, which was actually a very generic term for black tea in the 18th century. Package these up in our wonderful little tins with the Nutmeg Traders logo on the front, and it just says black bohea tea. That's available on our website. We've got the gunpowder tea also. We're trying to put together a kit with oolong, and that one's just the whole group isn't quite together yet. But the gunpowder tea, and this is it is really good tea.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one I like better. They're very different.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is like a Kimoon tea. Yeah, it's really good.
What is the best way to prepare venison for dinner?
I have not done venison for dinner. There are recipes for they would roast venison. You generally didn't see it because it was a specialty meat in the 18th century. They only did it this special way, right? It's like, oh, we're going to make a venison soup.
Yeah,
they wouldn't do that.
It's different now. We make it like we make steak or a roast or something. Oftentimes pressure cook it or something like that. So it's.
So I'm not sure how to answer it other than that because I haven't done enough research on that particular.
You got to catch it first.
Yeah.
So we're getting kind of close to the end. I want to do a couple donations.
Yeah.
And this is probably all the donations that we have. David Parker, thank you. Says, I'm glad for the great food on modern naval vessels, USN retired. Thank you. Thank you for your service. As if a says, my joke, April showers bring May flowers. What do May flowers bring? Answer is pilgrims. Can you talk more about the birch whisk? My name is Travis. Thank you. Powder Puffs and Kittens 333. Thank you so much. Says, love the channel. And then Jacob Kilgore. Thank you. Were there any record or evidence of frontiersmen or hunters using camouflage on hunts during the 18th and 19th centuries? Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. I don't know. Camouflage?
Well, birch twig whisks, I use it all the time in the cooking episode. Do I have one over here? No.
I've got one right here.
Do you? Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Birch twig whisk. And birch, it's got the bark that's peeled off of it. You take birch twigs, you peel that bark off. You can only do it, it's like for a certain amount of the year. So you really got to make your year's worth of whisks in like May, or else you can't get the bark off of them. Really common in Scandinavia, super common in the 18th century, of course, not popular anymore in England and, in North America it was popular. Of course, now it's like, what are you talking about? Birch twig whisk. They didn't have the metal whisks that we use today, right? And sometimes they do break in little pieces, come off. People are always concerned about how you wash them. It's like, boiling water, and it's like a wooden cutting board. They're kind of, they're kind of self-cleaning in a way. They are antiseptic, I guess, compared to certain kinds of things.
That one's never been washed.
Yeah, I can tell. And sometimes they would actually, instead of making them out of twigs, they would actually take a larger hunk and split it, not all the way so that it breaks open, but they would keep the back part of the piece of wood solid. They would split down this way, multiple ways, and then open those up so that it would be solid here and kind of in little pieces that way, and you could whisk with that. So you see sometimes those things in pictures. I've never tried to make one. It's a little trickier, but it would be easier to make one of those if it was the time of year when you couldn't get the bark off of your twigs. So super popular item in the time period. And camo for hunts, I haven't done enough of the sort of hunt research I haven't seen anything that referenced that There's a lot of stealthy. If you want to catch anything in the 18th century, you had to be fairly stealthy at what you were doing. But generally, it had to do with the idea that you were, you were upwind or no, downwind of your prey, so that they couldn't smell you, right? And you would be sneaky, you would be silent. But generally, that sight thing, not all that important.
I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I mean, if you've got one more lob question to go out on, Kyle, we can do that.
Sure. Can ship's biscuits be made of self-rising flour?
They can, but they didn't do that. There are most of the very commercial Navy, like British Navy biscuits, they were all made in this giant, very, very, consistent way, made from a certain kind of bolted flour. All the bran was gone. It wasn't whole wheat flour. And because they thought that's what lasted the best. There's a great book from like 1796 or so, and a gentleman who was writing about ship's biscuits, and they picked up a load of ship's biscuits, probably not a military ship, but a civilian ship. They picked up these at the Cape of Good Hope, and they were made in a different manner with a whole lot of bran in them. And he's like, oh, these are so much better, so much more edible, and they don't give you constipation. So there's a lot about exactly how ship's biscuits were made. Self-rising flour would make them too fluffy.
Well, real quick, I think that one of the most intimidating things for folks that want to try 18th century recipes is they go in the baking aisle and they don't know what kind of flour to get.
Yeah, I really like King Arthur flours, kind of whole white wheat. And they've got some unbleached flours because their flours wouldn't necessarily have been bleached like a lot of flours are today. More than likely, their flours and their wheat wasn't nearly as high gluten as it is today. So using something that's like an all-purpose flour, which is kind of half and half. There's that sort of very, short fiber flour. I can't remember the term for it right this second, that you would use for pastry. And then there's this super glutinous flour that you use for bread. And theirs was more likely something kind of floating around in the middle, which all-purpose flour kind of is in our time period. But it shouldn't be self-rising. It shouldn't be bleached.
But all-purpose flour is a safe way to go if you're just trying to experiment with some recipes.
Exactly. And you know what? Let's experiment. Right?
Yeah, right?
Nobody should be scared about doing anything food-wise. What could go wrong? Okay, you don't want to poison yourself. But, watch Monday's episode. Talk about experimenting with food. We're going to have fun on Monday's episode. Such a wonderful day and a wonderful time to kind of break up. It's time to get ready for the weekend. It's time to go home. I want to thank everyone for your tremendous help with what we do. Watching our videos and sharing them. Somebody must have shared scrambled eggs, because let me tell you, scrambled eggs has done really well. It's over 1 million views in 10 days or 2 weeks, like crazy. That's because lobster's done really well. It's because you guys sharing the videos. So thank you for doing what you do, commenting on the videos, watching the videos, sharing them with people you think that they would be interested. Also, special thanks to all the folks that helped us out with Super Chat today.
Yes, thank you.
And the amazing people that support us on Patreon and PayPal. And if somebody goes and they get some tea, they're helping us make videos.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your amazing kind of support. I feel like I'm supported by all these wonderful comments that help me say, yes, I do want to make another video. This is it's so helpful to other people. So I'm just so excited to come here. Thank you, everybody in the studio today. Thank you out there. Have a great weekend.